You think your family would never betray you? Till the day they hand you the key to your own heartbreak. That's the first thing Eli Carter thought. When he opened the old cedar box that had been locked in his mother's closet for over 20 years, he was never supposed to find it. Not like this. The box smelled of dust and lavender, tied with a faded green ribbon, and a note in cursive that read, "Do not open unless I'm gone, Mom." It had been 4 days since Ruth Carter died in her sleep at age 71, and now Eli sat alone in her tiny farmhouse in Corbett, Oregon, the place he had grown up. Raised by a woman who was both his mother, and he thought his only anchor in a world that often felt cold. But that note, that damn note, it shook something loose in him. Because when he opened the box, the first thing he saw wasn't money or photos. It was a birth certificate. Not his name, Noah Jacobson. Mother Ruth Carter. Father, unknown. Eli's breath caught in his chest. He flipped through the stack of letters beneath the tea-yellowed paper, shaky handwriting, tears in the ink. One sentence repeated over and over. "I'm sorry, Eli. You were never supposed to know." He didn't understand he was Eli Carter, son of Ruth Carter. Raised in this house by this woman, she never lied. She was warm, tough, loyal, and alone. She worked at a candle shop in Portland for most of his childhood, took the bus every day, never complained, never remarried after his dad left when he was 2. That's what she always said, "Your father left. It's just us now." But now, there was another name, another truth, a one she never told. And then folded at the bottom of the box was a photo, a baby boy, maybe 6 months old, wrapped in a hospital blanket. And next to him, in a nurse's gown, and curly dark hair, tucked in a cap, was a woman not his mother. But that baby had his eyes. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, wind brushing through the pine trees behind the house, and stared at the stars like they might arrange themselves into answers. He thought about the story he'd always been told about his dad walking out when he was a toddler, that Ruth raised him alone because she had no choice. But now, he wasn't even sure she was really his mother. Or worse, he was afraid she wasn't the woman he thought she was. The funeral had been small, just a few neighbors, his mom's old co-workers from the shop. And one surprise guest, Aunt Moyer, his mother's estranged sister from Montana, who hadn't visited in nearly a decade. After the service, Moira stayed behind. She hadn't cried. Just lit a cigarette behind the barn and said, "You need to talk to James." "Who's James?" Eli asked. She flicked her ashes onto the dirt and stared into the trees. "Your brother." Those 2 words nearly knocked the air out of him. "Moira, what the hell are you talking about? I'm an only child." "Mom, yeah." Well, she lied. That was the moment everything changed. Moira told him the story in pieces. James was older, Ruth's first son. She had him when she was 17. But the father. No one ever said his name out loud. It was dangerous, Moira whispered, her voice shaking, controlling. Ruth was scared. That's why she ran. That's why she changed her name. Eli stood frozen in the twilight, his hands trembling. "She left James?" he asked, his voice cracking. "No," Moira said slowly. "She took him, and then he disappeared." Eli stared at her. "Disappeared? What do you mean?" She shook her head. "They found his shoes near the Columbia River when he was 5. They never found a body. Ruth wouldn't talk about it again after that, and a year later, you showed up." The world tilted. Because if James was 5 when he vanished, and Ruth suddenly had a new baby 6 months later, then no, it couldn't be. Moira sighed, tossing the cigarette away. "I don't know where you came from, Eli, but you're not who you think you are." And neither was Ruth. That night, Eli locked himself in the attic and tore through every box he could find. Old tax returns, journals, a suitcase filled with toys that didn't look familiar. He found one last envelope taped under a drawer. It had no address, just a return name. Genevieve Holloway, Grays Harbor County. He Googled the name. She was a retired nurse, and the town. Only 2 hours away. The next morning, he filled his truck with gas, printed the address, and left a note on the fridge in case he didn't come back. "I need to know the truth. I need to know who I am." Because suddenly, Eli wasn't just grieving his mother. He was unraveling a mystery buried by time, sealed by silence, and written in someone else's name. But he had no idea. that opening that box would awaken a storm that had been waiting 30 years to return. A storm tied to a child who vanished. A secret inheritance that wasn't money. And a family that didn't just lie to him. They built him out of the lie. The drive to Grays Harbor County was gray and cold, a storm pushing across the Oregon coast like a warning. Eli Carter's hands gripped the wheel tighter than he needed to. His phone sat on the passenger seat, open to the directions for a nursing home tucked deep in Aberdeen Harbor Pines Care Center. Genevieve Holloway was listed as a resident, retired nurse, 3 years old. He didn't know what he'd say to her. He only knew he had to say something. The minute he walked into the facility, the scent of pine cleaner and overcooked oatmeal hit him like a memory. A nurse at the front desk looked up and smiled politely. "I'm here to visit Genevieve Holloway," Eli said, trying to keep his voice even. The nurse checked a clipboard. "Room 26. She's awake. Just finished her crossword." Eli followed the beige hallway until he reached the door. It was slightly open. Inside, an old woman with thin silver hair sat by the window in a wheelchair, a blanket across her lap, and a notebook on her tray. She looked up, her eyes sharp despite her age. "You're not my grandson," she said before he could speak, "but you've got the same eyes." Eli stepped inside, his heart thudding. "I'm Eli Carter. I think you knew my mother." "Ruth Carter." Genevieve tilted her head. Her lips pressed into a line. "Is that what she's calling herself now?" she muttered. Eli froze. "So you do know her?" Genevieve gave a long sigh and gestured to the empty chair beside her. "I never thought I'd hear that name again, especially not from a boy she raised." He sat, barely breathing. "I found a birth certificate, Noah Jacobson, and a photo. A baby I don't remember being. Letters saying I wasn't supposed to know." Genevieve looked out the window for a moment. "That baby wasn't you." The world shifted again. "What?" "That baby, Noah, was taken from the hospital in 1991. The mother died in childbirth. No family. Just a baby with bright blue eyes and a crooked cry. He was supposed to go into foster care, but then she showed up." Genevieve turned to him slowly, her voice low and bitter. "She walked in with a forged ID and a white coat, claimed she was his nurse. I didn't question her, I should have. But she had this calmness, this confidence. She took Noah and vanished." Eli felt a cold sweat trickle down his neck. "You're saying Ruth stole me?" Genevieve didn't flinch. "I didn't know until a week later. Police got involved. I gave a statement, but no one ever found the baby. That baby was you." Eli couldn't speak. His lungs felt crushed. He stood up, pacing the room. No, you're wrong. Ruth raised me. She loved me. She was kind." "She kidnapped you," Genevieve cut in. "Raised you under a lie, hid you in a small town, and gave you a different name. That doesn't mean she didn't love you, but it means you never really knew who she was." Eli sat back down, legs weak. His mind raced with flashes. His mother reading to him at night, holding his hand at the doctor's office, laughing at his stupid middle school jokes. Why would she do that? Genevieve hesitated. "There was another child before you, wasn't there?" James. Eli nodded slowly. "She said he disappeared." "She wasn't right after that," Genevieve said, her voice softening for the first time. "I knew her before all this. She was a smart girl. But after James, she became desperate, obsessed with filling the hole." Eli felt like he was going to be sick. "Do you know who my real parents were?" Genevieve reached to the shelf behind her and pulled down a manila folder. "I kept this for over 30 years, she whispered, hoping someone would come ask. I don't know why she picked Noah. Maybe because no one would come looking. But someone always does." Eli opened the folder. Inside was a photo of a young woman holding a newborn brunette. Wide smile, tired eyes. A hospital bracelet on her wrist said, "Jacobson, Laura." There was also a file. "Infant Noah, premature, mother deceased, father unknown." Placed in NICU, at the bottom was a handwritten note scrawled in red pen. "Baby discharged to unauthorized party. Investigation opened. Status unresolved." Eli stared at it, his hands trembling. "I was a case," he said quietly. "I was a stolen child." And then, just as his breath steadied there, was a knock at the door. Genevieve looked up. "I'm not expecting anyone." Eli stood, crossing to the door and opening it. A man stood there, early 40s, tall, scruffy beard, jacket dusted with rain. "You Eli?" he asked, voice rough. "Yeah, who are you?" The man reached into his jacket, pulled out a weathered photo, and handed it over. Eli looked down. It was a photo of two boys, one with messy black hair, one with curls and a missing front tooth. The second boy looked just like him. The man's voice broke the silence. "I'm Luke Jacobson. I've been looking for my brother for 30 years. Eli stared at the man in front of him. Luke Jacobson, his brother. They stood in the hallway of Harbor Pines Care Center, the silence between them louder than any storm outside. Genevieve watched from her chair, her fingers nervously tapping the armrest. Eli looked down at the photo again. Two boys playing in a yard, one grinning, one shy. There was something eerily familiar in the smaller one's eyes. How did you find me?" Eli finally asked. Luke took a slow breath. "After my mom died, I was adopted. New name, new state. But I never forgot Noah, my little brother. When I got older, I started searching. Dead ends for years. Until 2 weeks ago when someone posted a photo from a local Oregon funeral." Eli blinked. "Ruth's funeral?" Luke nodded. "Some woman, Moira, I think. She tagged the name Ruth Carter. I ran it through every old record I had." That's when the pieces started lining up. Eli leaned against the wall. "So you've been looking this whole time?" Luke's jaw clenched. "He was my brother. Of course I did. But I never expected to find a man with a new name, a different face, and no memory of me." Eli ran his hands through his hair. "I didn't even know I wasn't her real son until 4 days ago." Luke softened, just a bit. "I know that look, that hollow feeling. It's like your whole life was a borrowed dream." Genevieve finally spoke. "Luke, you said you were adopted. Did your parents know?" He nodded. "My adoptive mom said the caseworker mentioned I had a sibling who went missing in infancy. But back then, they told everyone it was a custody mistake, that my little brother had probably gone into foster care somewhere else. I never believed it." Eli's voice cracked. "Shouldn't because I didn't go into care. I was taken." Luke handed Eli a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this for you. For him. For the brother I lost." Eli unfolded it, seeing a simple letter, handwritten and faded with time. "Dear Noah, you were only 6 months old when I last saw you. I used to sneak into your crib and tickle your feet. You laughed so much Mom would have to come in and pretend to scold me. I didn't understand what death meant when she died. I only understood you were gone and that I never got to say goodbye. I've looked for you ever since. If you're reading this, I just want you to know, none of this was your fault. You were just a baby, and you were always loved." Eli's throat tightened. His hands shook. He couldn't say anything. Genevieve reached for a tissue, dabbing at her eyes. Ruth wasn't evil, but she was broken, and broken people, they do damage. Eli finally sat down. "Why would she take me, though?" "What happened to James?" Luke looked up. "Who's James?" Genevieve hesitated. "Ruth had a son before she took Noah. His name was James. He went missing when he was 5, supposedly drowned in the Columbia River, but no body was ever found," Eli added. "And a year later, she showed up with me." Luke stared at them, then said slowly, "That's not just grief. That's a pattern." Genevieve nodded grimly. "She lost one boy, stole another. But it wasn't just about filling a void. Eli could feel it in his gut. There was more. There was always more." They all sat in silence for a moment, the storm tapping at the windows. Then Genevieve said something that made Eli's heart stop. "Did you ever look in the cellar?" Eli frowned. "Cellar." Genevieve gave a grim nod. "The farmhouse in Corbett. That house was her father's before hers. Old place. There's a storm cellar under the kitchen. Ruth once told me she sealed it off after James died, said she couldn't bear to go down there again." Eli shook his head. "I've lived there my whole life. I didn't even know it had a cellar." Luke looked at him. "What would someone seal off? Under their house. After a kid goes missing?" That night, Eli drove back home. Luke followed in a rental. The farmhouse was quiet, moonlight glinting off the wet grass. Ruth's flowers drooped in the garden. The house still smelled like her. They moved the old fridge aside and pulled up a warped square of wood under the linoleum. Beneath it, Dust-covered hinges groaned. There was a cellar, and Ruth had nailed it shut. Eli pried the boards off with a crowbar. Luke held the flashlight. The air that rushed out smelled like mold, rust, and something darker. They climbed down carefully, the stairs creaking under their weight. Eli felt his chest tighten with every step. At the bottom was a small concrete room. Shelves lined the walls, jars of old preserves, a broken rocking horse, dusty blankets, and in the far corner, a toy chest. Eli approached it slowly. His hands trembled as he opened the lid. Inside were drawings. Childish, shaky crayon sketches of stick figures labeled Mom, James, and me. Some had smiley faces. Some had red scribbles over them. But the last drawing was different. It was a sketch of the house. And in it, a stick figure labeled James was standing by a well. Eli felt a shiver crawl up his spine. "There was never a well here," he whispered. Luke knelt beside him, holding up a faded Polaroid. It showed a boy about 5 grinning, dirt smeared on his cheeks. Behind him was a rope hanging from a tree, and in the bottom corner, a stone circle, a well. Eli stood suddenly. There was a well. Luke looked up at him. "You remember it?" "No," Eli said. "But I dreamed it." "What?" "When I was little, I used to have this nightmare of falling down a hole. Cold, dark, water rising." Genevieve's words echoed in his head. She sealed it off after James disappeared. But what if?
Oh.
James never left. What if the well was still there? The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Eli stood in the backyard, boots sinking into the damp ground. Luke followed close behind, carrying an old spade. They scanned the property, guided only by Ruth's old photo, the haunting drawing from the cellar. "There," Eli said, pointing near the edge of the forest, where a slight depression in the earth curved like a forgotten scar. "That's where the tree used to be." The rope swing from the photo, the blurred stone ring. The spot Ruth never let him play near as a child. They began to dig. Shovel after shovel, the soil grew heavier, clumpier, till Eli's spade struck something hard. Clink. Stone. Eli wiped the mud aside, revealing the outline of circular rocks, overgrown and buried a well. But it wasn't just buried. It had been filled in. Luke crouched, running his hand along the rim. She didn't just cover it, she packed it. Like she was hiding something, Eli's heart pounded. Or someone. Spent hours unearthing it. Stone by stone, memory by memory. Finally, as they cleared the center, the smell hit them damp, rot, mold, and decay. Luke's face turned pale. "Something's down there." They lowered a flashlight into the pit. About 10 feet down, caught between debris and collapsed timber, was something wrapped in a faded blue blanket, with a child's shoe poking out. Eli dropped to his knees. It was James. That night, the sheriff and forensic teams swarmed the farmhouse. Eli sat on the porch, dazed, while Genevieve comforted him. Luke stood silently beside the well, fists clenched, jaw tight. The sheriff, a kind-faced older man, came over. "Can't say for sure yet. But judging by the remains and the items found, it matches the timeline of James's disappearance." He glanced at Eli. "We'll run DNA to be certain, but it looks like your brother was buried here a long time ago." Eli rubbed his face. "I don't understand. Why would she?" Genevieve answered quietly. "Ruth told me James had fits. Said he'd scream at night, hurt the dog, tear up her dresses. I never believed her. But if she thought he was broken, maybe she snapped." Luke spoke through gritted teeth. "So she killed her own son, and then stole mine." The silence was deafening. Then Eli said and raised me like I was hers, gave me love, stability, piano lessons, even braces. And yet, Genevieve gently touched his shoulder. "Eli, you were not responsible for what Ruth did. You were a baby. You had no choice." But deep inside, Eli felt something shatter. His whole life had been borrowed from a broken woman running from her guilt. A few days later, Eli received a call. The DNA confirmed it. The remains were James Carter. They held a small ceremony under the tree where the well once stood. Simple wooden cross. Flowers, no speeches, just silence. Eli placed a letter at the foot of the grave. "You didn't deserve this. I wish I could have known you, played with you, fought with you like brothers do. I grew up in your room with your toys. Your name erased so mine could take its place. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll never forget again. That night, back in the farmhouse, Eli sat at the piano. Dust danced in the amber light. He pressed a key C minor. It echoed, cold and hollow. Then he played the melody Ruth used to hum. It's the one that once felt warm, now felt tragic. Luke came in, standing at the doorway. "Are you okay?" he asked. Eli paused. "No, but I think I'm starting to understand." Luke nodded, then sat beside him. "I lost my brother," he said softly, "but maybe I found him again." Eli looked at him, not as a stranger, but as family. Whispers spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Eli couldn't walk into town without people turning, murmuring, pretending not to stare. Some pitied him. Others feared him. A few even questioned if he knew what Ruth had done all along. He didn't care. His only focus now was the truth, because the sheriff had told him something strange. "We found the boy, but no trace of a birth certificate. No hospital records. Not even a missing persons report back then. It's like James never existed. And if Ruth had buried one truth, what else was hidden beneath this house?" That night, Eli stayed up late, pacing through the farmhouse with nothing but a flashlight and the creak of old floorboards to keep him company. The walls seemed to breathe. The photos on the shelves stared. He ended up back in the cellar. The door groaned open. Same mildew, same cold. Same half-unpacked boxes and forgotten toys. Except now he noticed something new. Near the far corner of the concrete wall. A small, rusted vent. Square, with screws nearly eaten by time. He knelt and pried it open. Behind the vent was a narrow shaft. And inside the shaft, something wrapped in waxy canvas. He pulled it out. Inside, a charred, half-burned journal. The first page, smudged but legible, read, "To whoever finds this, I tried to stop her. I really did." Eli's heart stopped. Genevieve. He rushed to the dining table and carefully opened the brittle journal. Every page felt like it could turn to ash in his hands. The entries were chaotic. It's written in two styles, neat cursive and frantic scrawl. Most were signed R, some G. One entry stood out. March 4th, 1997, James was screaming again. He said the black dog scratched him. "There's no dog. He scratched me too. He's sick. I don't know what's happening. G says he needs help. It's that we need to take him to the hospital. But what will they think? That I'm a bad mother? That I broke him? I won't let them take him. I'll fix it." Another. March 10th, 1997. I told her she was losing her mind. I threatened to call CPS. That's when she snapped. She locked the door. She said I would ruin everything. She poured gasoline in the cellar. I barely escaped through the coal vent. I don't know what happened to James. If this house ever burns, check beneath the floorboards. Truth is buried there. Genevieve hadn't just known. She tried to stop Ruth, and she almost died for it. Eli stood in the cellar, flashlight trembling in his grip. Beneath the floorboards, he dropped to his knees and began ripping up old planks, dust flying with every pull. Then, thunk, his crowbar hit metal. Locked tight, locked tight. It took all his strength, but the rusted latch snapped. He pried it open and shone the light down. Inside was a chest. Eli opened it, gasped. Inside were dozens of IDs, and children's names, photos, medical bands, all different, all marked with different last names. Some dated back to the 1980s. Eli's hands trembled. Ruth hadn't just taken him. She had done this before. Eli called the sheriff, voice shaking. Tomorrow morning, the farmhouse was a crime scene again. The FBI arrived. News vans circled. Reporters called it the Willow Creek Angel case. A twisted, decades-long web of abductions, disguised as adoptions. Ruth, the loving church organist. The quiet widow. The piano teacher. A serial child abductor. And somehow, no one had ever suspected. Genevieve came back one last time. She met Eli beneath the old tree where James was buried. "I never told anyone," she whispered, "because no one would have believed me, and I was scared she'd find me again." Eli looked at her, eyes burning. "But you tried." She nodded. "I was just a kid myself, and I never stopped regretting it." They stood in silence. Then she pulled something from her coat. A photograph. It was a baby boy, wrapped in a yellow blanket, same blue eyes as Eli. I found this in her room the night I ran. I always thought maybe it was you. Eli took the photo, heart aching. He didn't recognize the baby, but he knew now. He wasn't the only one Ruth had raised under false names. He was just the one who survived. That night, Eli returned to the cellar one last time. He sat at the piano, not to play, but to say goodbye. He struck a match, dropped it into the hole beneath the floorboards. Fire caught quickly, rushed through the vents, climbed the walls. The house moaned and cried like it knew its sins were being burned away. Eli stepped outside, watched it all go up in flames. Behind him, Luke placed a hand on his shoulder. Ready to leave? Eli nodded. As dawn broke, they drove away from Willow Creek. Two brothers, rebuilt from ashes, bound by truth, not blood, not lies, but choice. 6 months later, Eli lived in the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, a town where no one knew his name. He rented a cabin overlooking a quiet lake. Luke had stayed with him for a while, but eventually moved to California to join a foster reform advocacy group. They kept in touch. Weekly calls. Healing in different ways. Eli worked at a bookstore now. Simple, quiet, peaceful, but at night. He still couldn't sleep, because some songs don't leave you, even when the house that held them is long gone. One rainy evening, Eli wandered into a small antique shop on a whim. The store smelled of leather and lavender. Trinkets cluttered every shelf. A tiny bell rang as he entered. "Help you find anything?" the shopkeeper asked, an old woman with a scarf tied tight around her silver hair. "No," Eli smiled politely. "Just browsing." He wandered past clocks, books, porcelain dolls, and then he saw it. Tucked in the far corner, a baby grand piano, dark mahogany, carved pedals, the exact model Ruth once owned. Eli's heart stopped. No way. He walked closer. It even had the same scratches near the lid, where James once etched his initials as a child. J.W. He ran his hand along the top. Cold, dusty. The shopkeeper appeared beside him. "Funny thing," she said. "That piano came in about 2 months ago, from an estate sale." House had burned down. Eli's blood turned cold. "What town? Willow Creek, I think." He stepped back. "That's impossible. That piano burned with the house. I saw it." The woman tilted her head. "Well, I assure you, this one arrived after the fire. Delivery guy said it was found locked in a barn behind the property, untouched." Eli stared. The barn had been sealed for years. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. Again, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his cabin, the rain tapping like fingers on the window, until a soft note, one piano key, then another, faint, echoing through the still night. He froze. There was no piano in the cabin. He sat up. The sound came again, now unmistakable. "CAG, the melody Ruth always played before dinner?" No. He grabbed his flashlight and followed the sound to the back porch. Nothing. But when he turned around, a small music box sat on the steps. Wooden, hand-carved. He picked it up. Inside, a metal ballerina twirled to a broken version of the piano tune. On the bottom, a tag. For Eli. Mom. His hands trembled. The next day, he returned to the antique shop. But it was closed, permanently. Windows dark, door chained shut. A note taped to the glass. Closed due to fire damage. Do not enter. But there was no sign of fire. Eli stepped back. Suddenly uncertain if the shop or the woman had ever been real, 1 month later he moved again. Different town, different name. Because some ghosts don't live in houses. They live in melodies, in lullabies, in the things we choose to remember, and the ones we try to forget. Eli now writes under a pen name. He publishes stories based on what happened. He doesn't tell readers which parts are fiction, or how much of Ruth's darkness still lingers in dreams. But he ends every story the same way, with a question. If a lie raised you, but the truth broke you, which one would you call home?